My mother-in-law locked me in a bathroom while I was in labor. It nearly cost me everything, and then It's been 2 months since the chaos of Sophia's wedding, but I still can't shake the memories. They linger like a bad dream, one I can't wake up from. My name is Jessica, and I'm 29 years old. My husband Nathan, who's 30, and I just welcomed our daughter, Lila. She's the light of our lives and the reason I've managed to keep my sanity intact after everything that happened. Becoming parents has been a whirlwind of joy and sleepless nights, but it's nothing compared to the terror I felt on the day she was born. That day started innocently enough, filled with the usual pre-wedding chaos. Sophia, Nathan's 27-year-old sister, was marrying her longtime partner, Brian, at a stunning vineyard in Cedar Ridge. The venue was picturesque, with sprawling green hills and twinkling fairy lights strung between the trees. It was supposed to be the perfect day for Sophia, and I was determined not to ruin it. Nathan's family is complicated, to say the least. His younger sister Madison, who's 25, lives in Chicago and is always bubbly and chatty. We get along well, though we don't see each other often because of the distance. Then there's Sophia, the practical, organized sister who seems to have it all together. She's kind, the type of person who never forgets a birthday or lets a disagreement fester. And then there's Clara, Nathan's mother. She's 53 and has an iron grip on her children, a dynamic I didn't fully grasp when I first married into the family. Clara thrives on control. It doesn't matter if it's a family dinner or a monumental event like Sophia's wedding. She always has to have the last word. If she doesn't get her way, her mood shifts like a thunderstorm, fast, loud, and unsettling. I've always done my best to avoid conflict with Clara. For the most part, Nathan has been supportive, letting me handle his mom however I see fit. He knows she can be difficult. Still, her need for control was something I couldn't entirely escape, especially when I became pregnant. When Nathan and I found out we were expecting, it was both thrilling and terrifying. We've been trying for a while, and finally, our little miracle was on the way. Sophia had asked me to be her maid of honor months before I got pregnant. I was so excited at first, but as my due date crept closer to the wedding, it became clear I couldn't handle the responsibility. 6 months before the wedding, I told Sophia I'd have to step down. I was 3 months pregnant, and the thought of juggling appointments, fatigue, and wedding planning was overwhelming. I expected Sophia to be upset, but she surprised me. "Oh, Jess, I'm so happy for you," she said, hugging me tightly. "Don't worry about the wedding. I just want you to take care of yourself." Her reaction brought tears to my eyes. I didn't deserve such kindness. She even joked about moving the wedding date to accommodate my pregnancy, though we both knew that wasn't realistic. Sophia's younger sister Madison stepped in as maid of honor, and the preparations continued without a hitch. But Clara didn't take the news so well. She didn't say anything outright, but I could feel her disapproval in the way she spoke to me, or rather, didn't speak to me. The tension between us thickened as the months went on. She started making subtle digs, like commenting on how inconvenient my pregnancy was for the family's plans or how Sophia was handling everything so gracefully, despite all the distractions. It was exhausting. I told myself she was just stressed about the wedding, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that her frustration went deeper than that. As the wedding day approached, my pregnancy had reached its peak. My feet were swollen, my back ached constantly, and my energy was non-existent. Nathan and I debated whether I should even attend, but Sophia made it clear she wanted me there. "Jess, I don't care about all the wedding stuff," she told me over the phone a few days before. "Your family, and I want you to be part of my day. That's what matters to me." Her words reassured me, so I decided to push through the discomfort. I even asked her if my presence might cause any issues, worried about being a distraction. "You're overthinking this," she said, laughing. "Just come. Everyone will be too busy looking at Brian and me to care about anything else." I trusted her, but I still felt uneasy. Maybe it was the hormones, or maybe it was Clara's cold glares whenever we crossed paths. Either way, I knew the day would be long and emotionally draining. By the morning of the wedding, I was exhausted before we even arrived at the vineyard. Nathan and I had stayed up late the night before, packing for the hospital just in case. I was a few days from my due date, and we wanted to be prepared. When we got to the venue, The excitement in the air was palpable. Guests milled around, dressed to the nines, sipping champagne as they admired the beautiful setting. Sophia looked radiant in her lace gown, and Brian couldn't stop smiling. For a brief moment, I felt at peace, happy to be there for her. But then Clara spotted me. Her expression was hard to read, somewhere between disdain and annoyance. She barely acknowledged me as she fussed over Sophia, fixing her veil and barking orders at the wedding coordinator. I tried to brush it off, focusing instead on the ceremony ahead. Little did I know, that moment of unease was just the beginning of what would become one of the most harrowing days of my life. The morning of Sophia's wedding had already been a blur of activity by the time the ceremony was about to begin. Guests were finding their seats, and Nathan had disappeared to check on some last-minute details for Sophia. I stood near the back of the vineyard's reception hall, trying to shake the uncomfortable feeling that had been following me all day. My swollen feet throbbed in my heels, my back ached like never before, and a wave of nausea lingered in the pit of my stomach. "Are you sure you're okay?" Nathan had asked me for the 5th time that morning as we walked into the venue. "I'm fine," I lied, though I wasn't entirely sure of it myself. My due date was just days away, and every little twinge or cramp sent a ripple of panic through me. But I had promised Sophia I'd be there, and I wasn't about to let her down. I had made it through the pre-ceremony mingling without incident, even managing a few polite conversations with Clara, who hovered around Sophia like a hawk. Clara's passive-aggressive demeanor had been less subtle than usual. She greeted me with a curt nod, her eyes sweeping over my pregnant belly as if it were a personal affront to her. "Don't push yourself too hard," she muttered, not out of concern but as if it were an order. I ignored her, reminding myself that today wasn't about me. It was Sophia's day, and I wasn't going to let Clara ruin it for either of us. But as the guests settled into their seats, I began to feel lightheaded. A strange pressure built in my lower abdomen, and my legs felt weak beneath me. I excused myself, hoping some fresh air would help, but the hallways were too crowded. Instead, I made my way to a small restroom tucked away on the first floor, just down a quiet hallway. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. My body felt heavy and uncooperative, and my skin was damp with sweat. I leaned against the sink, trying to catch my breath, when suddenly a sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen. And then, my water broke. It wasn't a trickle or a slight leak like I'd read about. It was a full, unmistakable gush. Panic surged through me as I realized what was happening. The baby was coming, and it wasn't waiting for anyone's schedule. "Oh my God," I whispered, clutching the edge of the sink as another wave of pain hit. I fumbled for my phone, but before I could dial Nathan's number, the bathroom door swung open. It was Clara. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to outright horror as she took in the scene. My trembling hands, the soaked floor, the undeniable signs that I was in labor. "We have to go," I managed to gasp. "Call Nathan. Now." For a moment, I thought she would help. She stepped closer, looking me over as if assessing the situation. But then her face hardened, and the words that came out of her mouth left me speechless. "You can't do this now," she hissed. "This is Sophia's day. You are not going to ruin it." "What?" I stared at her, barely able to process what she was saying. "You heard me," she snapped, her voice low and firm. "This is Sophia's wedding. You've already caused enough trouble with this pregnancy. You're not going to steal her spotlight today. Are you out of your mind?" I cried, clutching my belly as another contraction tore through me. "I'm in labor. I need to get to a hospital." But Clara didn't budge. Instead, she grabbed my phone from my hand and stepped back toward the door. "I'll make sure Nathan finds you," she said coldly. "After the ceremony." "No, you can't do this," I shouted, but she was already walking out. The door slammed shut, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the lock. For a moment, I was too stunned to react. Clara had locked me in. She had actually locked me in the bathroom, alone, while I was in labor. Panic set in. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but the hallway outside was empty, and the noise from the wedding upstairs drowned out my cries. I was trapped, and I had no idea how long it would be before someone found me. I tried to stay calm, focusing on my breathing like the birthing class had taught me, but the pain was relentless. My contractions were coming faster now, each one more intense than the last. Sweat poured down my face, and I could feel my strength fading. I thought about Nathan, about how frantic he would be when he realized I was missing. I thought about our baby, about how I might not make it to the hospital in time. The fear was overwhelming, and I fought to keep it from swallowing me whole. But as the minutes dragged on, my body began to give out. I slid to the floor, leaning against the cool tile wall, and closed my eyes. The pain was too much, and my energy was gone. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of my own voice, weak and hoarse, whispering, "Please, someone help me." When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The bright fluorescent lights stung my eyes, and the first thing I saw was Nathan, sitting beside me with tears streaming down his face. "Lila's here," he said softly, his voice trembling. "She's safe. You're both safe." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a flood of memories. Clara locking me in the bathroom, my desperate cries for help, the overwhelming fear that I might not survive. The happiness of meeting my daughter was tempered by the knowledge that someone I had trusted, even grudgingly, had put both of our lives in danger. And as much as I wanted to focus on the joy of Lila's arrival, I knew I couldn't ignore what had happened. Clara had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The first thing I noticed when I woke up in the hospital was how quiet it was, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. My body felt heavy, and a dull ache spread through me as I tried to move. I could hear the steady beep of a heart monitor, the faint hum of machines, and then Nathan's voice, trembling and low. "Jess," he whispered, his face pale and tear-streaked as he leaned over me. It took me a moment to fully process where I was. The last thing I remembered was being locked in that bathroom, pounding on the door until my voice gave out. Seeing Nathan's face should have brought relief, but instead, a surge of fear hit me like a wave. "Lila," I croaked, my throat dry and sore. Nathan's face crumpled, and he let out a shuddering breath before wrapping his arms around me. "She's okay," he said softly. "She's perfect. You're both okay." The words washed over me, but the tension in my chest didn't ease. I had so many questions, but my body felt too weak to ask them all at once. Slowly, the pieces started to come back. The wedding, Clara's chilling words, and the moment I realized I was trapped. Nathan seemed to sense my turmoil because he sat back, his hand gripping mine tightly. "You scared me," he admitted. "When I couldn't find you, I knew something was wrong." "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Nathan explained how he'd noticed my absence shortly after the ceremony began. At first, he thought I'd stepped outside for air or found a quiet spot to rest, but when 15 minutes passed with no sign of me, his worry grew. "I started looking everywhere," he said. "The reception hall, the garden, even the parking lot. Then I remembered you'd been feeling off earlier and checked the bathrooms. When he got to the restroom, he heard faint banging from inside. He said he called my name and heard nothing at first, but then a weak, barely audible sound. My voice answered him. That's when he broke the lock, finding me unconscious on the floor. "I've never been so scared in my life," he said, his voice breaking. "You weren't moving, Jess. I thought I lost you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I squeezed his hand. "You saved me," I whispered. He shook his head. "I just got lucky." The paramedics said it was close. Too close. I wanted to focus on the relief of being alive, of Lila being safe, but something burned in the back of my mind. "Clara." "Nathan," I said, forcing myself to sit up slightly. "Your mom. She locked me in." His expression darkened, the softness in his eyes replaced by something sharp and angry. "I know," he said. "She told me everything." He went on to explain that after I was taken to the hospital, Clara had tried to downplay what happened. When Sophia confronted her, Clara admitted that she'd locked me in the bathroom, claiming it was to keep the wedding running smoothly. Nathan's voice was tight as he recounted the confrontation. "She actually tried to justify it, Jess," he said, his jaw clenching. "She said you were overreacting, that you could have waited until after the ceremony to go to the hospital. Like your life and Lila's life meant nothing compared to Sophia's wedding. I felt my stomach churn with a mix of rage and disbelief. And Sophia? I asked. She's furious, Nathan replied. She told Clara that what she did was unforgivable and that she had no right to decide who was more important. Sophia told me later that Lila's birth was the best gift she could have gotten on her wedding day. She's been texting me nonstop, asking how you and the baby are. Hearing that made me want to cry again, but I was too drained to feel much beyond exhaustion. Just then, a nurse walked in, carrying a small bundle wrapped in a soft pink blanket. "Here's someone who's been waiting to meet you," she said with a warm smile. My heart stopped as she placed Lila in my arms. She was so small, her tiny hands curled into fists, her face serene and perfect. Tears slid down my cheeks as I looked at her, all the fear and pain from earlier melting away in that moment. "She's beautiful," I whispered, unable to take my eyes off her. Nathan sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders as he looked down at our daughter. "She is," he agreed, his voice full of wonder. For a few minutes, nothing else mattered. But when the nurse left and the room fell quiet again, reality crept back in. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice trembling. Nathan's expression hardened. "We're pressing charges," he said firmly. "She put your life and Lila's life in danger. That's not something I can forgive." I nodded, though part of me felt conflicted. As much as I hated Clara for what she'd done, the thought of tearing the family apart was overwhelming. "It's not just about what she did to you," Nathan continued. "It's about protecting Lila. I won't let her grow up around someone who could do something like this." He was right, of course. I knew he was, but it didn't make it any easier. As if on cue, the door opened, and Sophia stepped in, still wearing her wedding dress. Her husband Brian followed close behind, along with Madison. They looked worried but relieved when they saw me sitting up with Lila in my arms. "Jess," Sophia exclaimed, rushing to my side. "I was so scared when I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I nodded, tears spilling over again. "I'm okay," I said, my voice breaking. "Thanks to Nathan." "And Lila." Sophia smiled, her eyes glistening as she reached out to touch Lila's tiny hand. "She's perfect," she said softly. We talked for a while, Sophia assuring me that she didn't care about the wedding drama, only that Lila and I were safe. Madison chimed in, saying she'd do whatever she could to support us. For the first time since marrying Nathan, I felt like I was truly part of the family. Sophia and Madison's family, not Clara's. But even in that moment of love and unity, Clara's shadow loomed large. I knew the fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The days following Lila's birth were a blur of emotions, exhaustion, and a growing storm within Nathan's family. At first, I tried to focus on the joy of holding my daughter, of finally being home and safe. But the weight of what Clara had done was impossible to ignore. Every time I thought about being locked in that bathroom, the fear came rushing back like a tidal wave. Nathan was my anchor. He stayed by my side, helping with Lila and handling the countless texts and calls from concerned family and friends. Madison checked in daily from Chicago, her voice always cheerful but laced with worry. Sophia and Brian visited often, bringing meals and making sure I didn't feel overwhelmed. But Clara's absence was palpable. Not that I wanted her near me or Lila. I'd made it clear to Nathan that she was no longer welcome in our lives. But the silence from her end felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. She called again, Nathan said one evening, setting his phone down with a sigh. "What did she say this time?" I asked, my voice tight. "More of the same," he replied. "She's sorry. She didn't mean to hurt anyone. She was just trying to protect Sophia's day." I scoffed, the anger bubbling up again. Protect Sophia? By risking her niece's life? That makes no sense. Nathan nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know. I told her we're done, that she's not welcome here, and that we're moving forward with pressing charges." Hearing him say it out loud made my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to cut her off entirely and never look back, but another part, the part that always tried to keep the peace, felt conflicted. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" I asked softly. Nathan turned to me, his eyes filled with determination. Yes, he said firmly. She locked you in a bathroom while you were in labor, Jess. She didn't care about you or Lila. She cared about appearances. That's not someone we can have around our daughter. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. He was right. I knew he was right. But it didn't make the situation any less painful. The tension reached a boiling point a few days later when Nathan finally told Clara we were filing a restraining order. According to him, she broke down in tears, wailing about how unfair we were being, how much she had sacrificed for her children, and how she didn't deserve this kind of treatment. She even brought up the money, Nathan said, his voice tinged with frustration. What money? I asked, confused. I've been helping her financially, he admitted. Not a lot, just enough to cover some of her bills. But I told her that's over too. She can't expect us to support her when she's done something like this. I was stunned. I hadn't known Nathan was helping Clara financially, but the fact that he was willing to cut her off now spoke volumes. How did she take that? I asked. He let out a humorless laugh. Not well. She accused me of abandoning her, of choosing you over her. As if that's even a choice I need to make. That night, I held Lila a little tighter, grateful for Nathan's unwavering support, but also deeply saddened by how far things had spiraled. The following day, Sophia came over to visit, her expression grim as she sat down beside me. I have to tell you something, she said, her voice hesitant. It's about Mom. My heart sank. What now? Sophia hesitated, then said, she told me she was trying to teach you a lesson at the wedding. She thought you were being selfish by showing up so close to your due date, like you were trying to make everything about you. I stared at her, stunned. Are you serious? Sophia nodded, her expression pained. She actually thought I'd be mad at you for going into labor on my wedding day, as if that's something anyone can control. When I told her I was thrilled Lila was born that day, she didn't believe me. She kept saying I'd changed my mind and that I'd realized you'd ruined everything. I felt a wave of anger rise in my chest. How can she be so delusional? I don't know, Sophia admitted, but I want you to know that none of this is your fault. You didn't ruin anything, Jess. You made my wedding day even more special. Tears filled my eyes as I reached for her hand. Thank you, I whispered. Sophia squeezed my hand tightly. We're going to get through this, she said. Together. Over the next few days, things went from bad to worse. Clara started sending Nathan and me long, rambling text messages, alternating between apologizing and blaming us for tearing the family apart. At one point, she even suggested that we were the reason she'd acted out at the wedding. If you hadn't been so focused on your baby, one message read, I wouldn't have felt so pushed aside. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She was actually blaming an unborn child for her behavior. Nathan finally blocked her number, but the damage was already done. The messages had left me shaken, and I couldn't stop thinking about the lengths Clara might go to if she felt cornered. Madison called that evening, her voice full of concern. Do you think Mom's losing it? She asked. I don't know, I admitted, but I don't think we can take any chances. She's too unpredictable. Madison agreed, and the next day she flew in from Chicago to help us sort things out. She even suggested we have Clara evaluated by a professional, just to rule out any underlying mental health issues. Part of me hoped the evaluation would provide answers, maybe even a path to reconciliation. But when the results came back, they were inconclusive. Clara wasn't suffering from any diagnosable condition beyond generalized anxiety. Her behavior, it seemed, was driven by years of unchecked control issues and resentment. It's just who she is, Madison said sadly, and I don't think she's going to change. Hearing those words felt like the final nail in the coffin. Clara had chosen her need for control over her family, and there was no going back. Nathan filed the restraining order the next day, ensuring that Clara couldn't come near us or Lila without facing legal consequences. It was a painful decision, but one we both knew was necessary. As I sat in Lila's nursery that night, rocking her to sleep, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a lingering sense of loss. Clara had forced our hand, and though I didn't regret protecting my daughter, I mourned the family we could have had. But as I looked down at Lila's peaceful face, I knew we'd made the right choice. She was my priority now, and nothing, not even Clara's chaos, would change that. It's been 2 months since we filed the restraining order against Clara, and in that time, our lives have taken on a semblance of peace. The days are long and exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, but they're also some of the happiest days I've ever known. Lila's little smiles, the way she curls her tiny fingers around mine. It's enough to make all the chaos fade away. Nathan has been my rock through it all. He takes every opportunity to remind me that we're in this together. He's a natural with Lila, soothing her when she cries and staying up late to give me a break when I'm at my wit's end. Watching him with her fills me with a love I didn't know was possible. But even with all the joy Lila brings, Clara's actions linger in the back of my mind. Every so often, I catch myself replaying the events of that day. The fear, the helplessness, the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I want to forget, to leave it all behind. But it's not that simple. A week after the restraining order was granted, Clara showed up at our house. It was the middle of the night, and Nathan and I were jolted awake by a loud pounding on the door. My heart raced as I clutched Lila close to me, unsure of what was happening. Nathan got up to check, and I stayed in the nursery, holding my breath as I listened to the muffled voices downstairs. It didn't take long for me to realize who it was. Clara's voice was unmistakable, even through the walls. She was yelling, her words slurred with desperation. "You can't keep her from me," she screamed. "I'm her grandmother. I have a right to see her." Nathan told her to leave, his voice calm but firm. When she refused, he threatened to call the police. That finally seemed to get through to her, and after a few more minutes of shouting, she left. When Nathan came back upstairs, his face was pale with anger. "She's unhinged," he said quietly. "This has to stop." The next morning, Clara sent us a long, rambling text message. She accused us of punishing her for being a mother, claimed we were tearing the family apart, and then tried to justify her actions at the wedding yet again. "I had to put one child's needs ahead of another," she wrote. "That's what a mother does. I didn't want Lila to ruin Sophia's wedding." I couldn't believe what I was reading. How could she still think she was in the right? How could she continue to blame an innocent baby for her own selfishness? The text spiraled into something even darker as Clara revealed her true feelings. She admitted that she felt threatened by Lila, that she was afraid her children would no longer value her now that there was a new baby in the family. "She's replaced me," Clara wrote. "I've always been the one who held this family together, but now it's all about her." The words made my stomach turn. The idea that a grown woman could be jealous of a baby, her own granddaughter, was beyond comprehension. Nathan blocked her number after that, and we decided to share the messages with Madison and Sophia. Both of them were horrified. "She needs help," Madison said, her voice shaking with anger. "This isn't normal," Sophia agreed, but her sympathy for Clara was gone. "I can't believe I defended her for so long," she said. "She's shown us who she really is, and we can't ignore it anymore." At Madison's insistence, Clara was evaluated by a psychologist. The results were heartbreaking but unsurprising. She wasn't suffering from any mental illness that could explain her behavior. The psychologist diagnosed her with generalized anxiety disorder, but the rest of her actions were rooted in her personality. Years of unchecked control issues, resentment, and jealousy. "This is just who she is," Madison told me afterward. "She's not going to change." Hearing that felt like a final blow. Part of me had held on to the hope that there was some explanation, some way to make sense of everything. But now I knew there wasn't. Clara had chosen her path, and it didn't include us. Nathan made the decision to cut all ties with her, and Madison and Sophia followed suit. For the first time in decades, Clara found herself completely alone. I wish I could say I felt relief, but mostly, I just felt sad. Not for her, but for the family we could have been. "Do you think we did the right thing?" I asked Nathan one night as we sat on the couch, Lila sleeping soundly in her crib. He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said firmly. "She crossed a line, Jess. More than once. We have to protect Lila." I nodded, though the ache in my chest remained. In the weeks since then, we've begun to move forward. Madison and Sophia have become an even bigger part of our lives, visiting regularly and showering Lila with love. Seeing the way they've embraced her reminds me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up, who care, and who choose love over everything else. As for Clara, I don't know what the future holds. I can't imagine letting her back into our lives, but I also can't shake the feeling of loss that comes with cutting someone off entirely. For now, though, I'm focusing on what matters most: my daughter, my husband, and the life we're building together. Lila deserves to grow up in a world filled with love and support, free from the toxicity that Clara brought into our lives. This chapter of our story is over, and though it's not the ending I wanted, it's the one we needed. As I sit here typing this, Lila is stirring in her crib, her little hands reaching out as she dreams. Nathan is beside me, his arm around my shoulders, and for the first time in months, I feel at peace. We've been through hell, but we made it out, and for that, I'm grateful.